Tutorial on how to create motion in VR with Gato and the XRTools. So here's the project that already exists. I'll be recreating it with a blank Gato project, and I'll also show you the steps you need in order to get like a project. There's a couple settings you need to set on a blank project in order to make it compatible with VR, and I'll show you how to set that up too. So first thing I'm going to do is, I guess I'm just going to quit to the main menu and save. And I might need to, I don't know, we'll see. I'm going to make a new project. I'll call this XR movement. And I'm just going to save this. I'm not going to put this in the class repository because we already have an example in the class repository. But what I'm making will be exactly the same as what's in the class repository. I'll create a folder. Again, for VR, you want either mobile or compatibility, okay? Unless you're using the HTC Vive, in which case you should be able to use Forward Plus. I'm going to hit Create. Then the first thing I'm going to do in order to get up and running is go ahead and download the XRTools plugin. These are the official tools made by Gato developers to extend the XR capabilities of the engine. So I'm going to download it and install it. And you'll see now we have this import menu. Some scripts are going to fail to initialize. That's fine. That's mainly because we need to go to the project settings and enable the plugin. Okay, so I'm going to go to the project settings, plugins, and click enable. And while we're in the project settings, I'm going to change those other settings that you also need to change for XR. So for starters, in the general settings, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and go to XR. And I'm going to click on Open XR and click Enable. Then I'm going to click on Shaders and also click Enable. And then the final thing I'm going to do is for pass-through. So if you want to have like a transparent background and do mixed reality, like on the Oculus headset, what you're going to need is the, in Window, I'm going to go to, maybe it's not in Window. Let me search for background. So in Viewport, under Rendering in Viewport, I'm going to enable a transparent background. And that's going to allow the editor to have a transparent environment background. So then I'm going to hit Save and Restart. And then now I'm just going to open up the project settings and make sure that everything, got enabled good. That's great. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank 3D scene. I'll call it main. And what the XR plugins has, which is really nice, it has a couple like things that just speed up the process. So instead of having to add in that whole extra script attached to your main or your origin that sort of sets all the initialization code, you can just go into the you can either look for it by hand inside the XRTools plugin, but you'll see that there's like a lot of folders, right? Although it is right down here, so it's down here. You want this Start XR scene, right? Another way you can load scenes is you can always do Command-Shift-A, and this pulls up like a list of all the scenes in your project. And this is kind of nice because if you just remember the name of it, you can just type for it and it'll find it. So I'm going to load it in this way and hit Start XR and open it up. And this is going to be a scene that basically just like takes care of all the boilerplate code, right? We can also toggle Enable Pass-Through here. The only other thing we need to add is an XR origin. Okay. The origin needs to have a camera. And the origin also needs to have two controllers. So XR, it doesn't need a camera 3D. It needs an XR camera 3D. So XR cam 3D. Then I will add in XR. And you'll see, right, we have all of these extensions now here, all these XR extensions. These are because we loaded in this XRTools plugin. So you can really go nuts and like look for a whole bunch of different stuff in here. But I'm just going to use some of the basic stuff. I'm going to use the XR controller, 3D. I'm going to name it left. I'll duplicate it and name it right. I'll assign the tracker to the left hand for the left one, and I'll assign it to the right hand for the right one. And then I'll add a CSG box that I'll make nice and small, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. Then I'll take the tracker. First, I'll move the camera up a little bit. I'll move it like up, oops. Up like 1 meter. 1 meter. Oh, come on. How do you do snapping? All right, I'll just move it up a little bit, whatever. Then I'll take the controller and I'll move it over a little bit and up, kind of, roughly in the position of a left hand. I'll take this CSG box and duplicate it and then move it. I'll reset its transformation to 0, 0, 0 because we want to move the actual controller itself, not the box, right? We want to make sure that the whole controller is moved. Otherwise, the box is going to be like not where your controller or hands are. So I'm going to move this up and over. And that's like good enough. As soon as the game starts, these are going to start moving around anyway, so this is really just for reference. Then I'll hit main, I'll save the scene, and we should be good to go. Now, we won't be able, right, it's hard to test it, but if you were using the HTC Vive and you had it plugged in, you could just hit play now, and you would be loaded into an XR scene that you could move your controllers around and stuff, right? And obviously we can't see anything. Does anybody know why we can't see anything? Yeah, right? Remember we always need a light source? So I forgot to add a light source, so I'll just add, oops. I'll add a sun, and I'll also add an environment just for the fun of it. All right, save it again, hit play. And so this is what it would look like on the HTC headset, right? I am, yeah, because I'm not able to get this onto the, let me see real quick if it's on the DIC headset, or DIC Wi-Fi. If it is on the DIC Wi-Fi, I might be able to show you this in WebXR. But also, this whole headset is being kind of annoying today, so maybe not. We'll restart it. If you want to get it to the Oculus, right, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Again, we have that WebXR workflow, which I can show you just how to export it or set it up for that anyway. That's probably the easiest way to export it for the headset. So again, you would just want to go to project settings. I mean, first, if you haven't done this on your computer yet, you would want to make sure that you had the export templates. So you would go to manage export templates. Make sure you have stuff listed here. If you don't, you want to download and install them. Then you can go to project, export, and then add a new preset for the web. You can call it WebXR. You might want to hit mobile and then click fix import. And then I think that should be good. Then you could just hit, then you could export your project. Oh, you also would want to toggle, if you want to sort of debug it, you want to toggle the runnable thing. It's already set up. And so now we can kind of hit this little button and we can run it in the browser, right? And if you have configured your editor correctly, you can go to your computer's IP address over the network and on the headset and test it out that way. Anyway, this is all, I'm supposed to be teaching you about movement. I'm not exporting stuff, so I'm getting a little sidetracked. So let's get back to the movement part, right? The next thing you want to do for actually making things move around, it's actually pretty straightforward with the XRTools. All you really need, I mean, first, you need a level, so let's make it a level real quick. I'll make a box, call it level. I'll make it lower and bigger. And I'll make another like cylinder. And that'll be our level. You want collision shapes so that we can collide with them, and particularly for the teleporting, the collision shapes are helpful for the teleporting, knowing that there is something to teleport to. So turn on collisions. Where'd they go? Where are the collisions? Right. Okay. If you have, I think, let's see. Yeah. If you have CSG shapes that are children of another face, of another shape, you just need to make the CSG root turn on collisions. Okay, now we have collisions turned on. Then let's get the movement going. So all you really need is you just need to attach a movement provider to the controller. That sounds kind of complicated, but basically all you want to do is add a new scene from the plugin. You can find it by hand, I think, in the functions folder. We have this sort of movement direct scene. You just want to drag this movement direct scene onto the controller that you want to have. Like if you want to use the thumbstick on either of the controllers to move, you just want to drag the movement direct scene onto the thumbstick, onto the controller of the thumbstick you want to use. So let's say I want to use the left-hand controller to move. I'm going to drag this movement direct scene to be a child of the left-hand controller. And you'll notice that it did this thing. It created a player body node, which is what the XRTools uses for helping navigate space. So you just do movement direct, and then you can turn on strafing. So strafing is when if you use left and right, strafing will mean you move left and right without turning. So you can just turn on strafing. And then let's say you wanted to be able to rotate with the other controller. With that, in order to do that, you can just look for turning, movement turn. Yeah, I guess you can also just filter in the files. That's probably even better. So just search for movement turn, drag it on the controller you want. And then this should work. If you were to save this and deploy it to the headset, you would have a controller that you could move around up, down, left, and right with the left-hand controller, and you could turn and move with the right-hand controller. If you want to do teleporting, it's a very similar thing. All you need to do is search for teleport. T-E-L-E, port. Oh, teleport. And we have this. We have a couple teleport things because they also have teleport areas which you can use, but the one you want is the function teleport. And then you just drag that onto the controller you want. And actually, you don't want it to be on the same controller. I mean, you might be able to have it on the same controller as your movement. I don't see why you couldn't. But now, whenever you pull the trigger on the right-hand controller, it will make this this teleporty dealie appear, which is pretty nice. And that's kind of all there is to it, really. If you want to change things about the teleporting, you can change the button that it uses. So you would type in a different button. You can change the visuals, right? So you can change the color of this path. You can change the icon on the path. You can also change the, you can specify a player scene and a material if you don't like the blue capsule, right? So yeah, that's basically how you can configure teleporting movement for your projects. And then getting it onto the headset is the final chapter, which I've talked about in the past, so I won't bore you with now. Any questions? Any final things that y'all want me to cover in depth out loud before I give you individual working time? Yeah.
I guess it's kind of like a heads-up display, but if you wanted I guess an image would be an easy way, but an image to kind of sit in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Just kind of almost like a frame around it.
Yeah.
How would you set that up?
Yeah. I mean, Jennifer, you did that, right? Do you remember how the process for setting up, right, with your particles on the
Oh, like I'm doing 2D and 3D?
Well, so you had like you had your particles sort of on a thing that was hovering kind of in front of the user's eyes. Do you remember sort of the general steps that you did for that?
It was with the file that you sent me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like a note sheet with like
Yeah, I mean, basically, one of the easiest things that you can do is you can just take a node and put it in front of the camera, right? So, for instance, you could take a sprite 3D, right? Like a sprite 3D is a good one. Come back. And sprite 3Ds are like flat images in 3D, right? So, for instance, we have our little robot texture somewhere. Oh, we don't. Where's our robot? Oh my god. Freaking out. Oh, wait. Okay, there's a robot. Phew. You can take this, so if you want just like an image, right, you can just load a texture into a sprite 3D. Here we have our sprite 3D, and then you could just move this to be like literally here, right? And then if we were to run the scene, it would currently look like this.
And like if you move around it.
Yeah, exactly, right? If we were to rotate the camera.
Because it's in like the same.
Exactly, because it's the child of the camera. Yeah, that's exactly right. So like, right, I'm gonna rotate the camera, and you'll see that it sort of follows.
Would lighting affect that?
Lighting would affect it, right? So that's like.
Wait, could you set it up on like a separate layer as lighting?
Mm-hmm. You can set it up on a separate layer. Another thing so what we did specifically with Jennifer's thing is we actually made what's known as a separate viewport, and then we made a 2D scene. So for instance, you could have a new scene, and I could call this like and this could be a user interface scene too, right? I'll call this like UI or HUD. HUD. And I'll drag in the robot, and I'll make like a label. And I'll say like information. And then I forget exactly some of the steps, so let's see if we can figure it out. You can use what's known as a viewport. So you can use a viewport, a sub-viewport. And a sub-viewport, why don't we do this? Let's transition to working time and give me like 5 minutes to look this up again, and then I'll share it again in a couple minutes. Okay? Yeah. So why don't we feel free? You're probably already starting to work on your projects, but go ahead and start working on your projects. I'm going to be figuring this out, and I'll start shouting when I figure it out again. Yeah, we had an example of that somewhere over here. Saving and loading, noise, export templates. Viewport demo. Here we go. Yeah, so this is how you want to do it. So what we have is we have this 2D scene, and the 2D scene has, stuff in it. And I'll add in a label or something. Text. And then in 3D, you create a sub-viewport, and you instance the 2D scene as a child of the sub-viewport, okay? And then what you want to do is assign a sub-viewport texture to a sprite 3D. That's how it works. So you take we have this 2D scene, right? This 2D scene has these 2D elements. And then in 3D, we create a sub-viewport node and instance the 2D scene as a child of that node. And then in the same scene, on a sprite 3D, you can create a a viewport texture, and you can then pick the sub viewport that you just created, and this will render whatever's in this scene onto this texture onto this plane in 3D. Yeah. And also you'll notice, right, it has a it automatically makes the background transparent too. And I believe that these are potentially even interactable. I think, like, I wonder if I had a button. So this is also a way to make, like, user interface, for instance, in 3D, I think. You might need to do a little bit more trickery in order to get it to actually work. But let's see, if we just ran this scene and I selected the current scene. No, you can't actually click it. So you need to, like, do a little bit more work to get that to work. Maybe it's like, maybe by turning this off. Let's see if that works. Nope. Okay. There is a way to, like, pass input through. And if you're interested in that, let me know and I can figure it out. Cool. Anybody have any? Well, let me just pause and upload the recording.